AM1170. The Answer.
Welcome back to Military Mondays. In the studio, we've got Nathan Fletcher. Is that your jam, Nathan? You requested that song.
Right there. I love that.
You consider yourself a survivor?
Yes.
I think you're a
Don't we all?
I think you're a thriver.
Well, you can't thrive if you don't survive.
I guess it's...
We had a debate on this, and we have a little video on our website, and we were talking about to help those veterans who survived combat. And initially, we said not only survive the peace that follows, and then we changed it. To say we help those veterans who survived combat thrive in the peace that follows. So I think you got to do one to get to the other.
I think you could fit all that in a single tweet, can't you?
Yeah, no, that'd probably fit. That would work. 140 characters, right?
I think that's great. Well, before everything that you are today, you're a native Arkansan,
Yep.
and we're going to try and tell the Nathan Fletcher story today. I appreciate you joining us in the studio.
No, it's wonderful to be here.
All right, so you're a proud native son of Arkansas, is that right?
Yeah, so technically I was born in Carson City, Nevada, and I was born there, and then at a young age moved to Arkansas, and it was a little bit of a culture shock. I mean, I was 7, 8 when I moved, and Carson City, Nevada is not like a major metropolitan area. But it was the West.
I didn't do great in geography, but I'm going to go ahead and fully concur with that. It is not a major.
It is not a major geography. And I remember as a kid in Nevada I remember literally folks would walk around with 6-shooters on their hips. I mean, it was like a little Wild West kind of cowboy days. But I moved to Arkansas, and I got off the plane, and the first thing is I said, "Oh my God, where are the mountains?" Because I loved the mountains, and I loved the snow, and I loved hiking and skiing and doing all that. And there were no mountains, and it was hot. I mean, it was like the summer. I literally felt like I walked inside someone's mouth. I mean, it was just hot and humid and sticky.
You did. You walked into the mouth of the nation,
South Arkansas, and so I get there, and the first week, I go to school, and I'm dealing with the culture shock and the difference. And they say we have a deer day, and I go, "What is a deer day?" There was no school, and I asked, "What's a deer day?" And they said, "Well, the first day of deer season, there's no school, so everyone can go hunting." And I was like, "Oh man, the world has changed." But grew up in a wonderful little town called Smackover, Arkansas. It was Sumac-Cover. It was a French name, and no one could pronounce it, so they just ran it all together. And the battling buckaroos of Smackover, Arkansas, about 1,200 people in the town. I think we had 44, 45 in my high school graduating class. Well, that was the number in attendance. Those weren't the number that graduated. We had a couple certificates of attendance, one stoplight. But, I got to tell you what's interesting about it now as you look back on it. At the time, I just wanted to leave. I just wanted to go to California. I had a lot of family in California, and I just said, I want to get out of this small town, and I want to get out of Arkansas, and I want to go to California and surf and ski and live a different life. And as I look back on it, I'm incredibly fond of it because, when you live in a small town, it changes your interactions with folks, because you live there. You can't cut people off in traffic when you live in a small town. Because they know you, or they know your mom, or they work with your uncle, or and it really does. I think America could use a lot more kind of small town interactions.
I love that you mentioned that. I've explained that to people why I still stop and help people in San Diego County.
Yeah.
My dad grew up in a town that size in Iowa, and I remember even as a little kid, he would stop and try to help everyone.
Of course, yeah. If someone was pulled over, that's what you did. You changed your tire. Do you need gas? Do you need a ride somewhere?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I remember being embarrassed by it. And then as I got older, I sort of tolerated it, and now I find myself doing it. And I remember him just saying, you might see him tomorrow. And if you don't, you should treat everybody like you're going to see him tomorrow.
I took someone home with me a few years ago, and we were kind of walking down the street, and some car drove by, and I waved, and they waved. And the person I was walking with said, "Who's that?" I said, "Well, I don't know." And they said, "Well, why'd you wave at him?" And I said, "Well, because that's what you do."
That's exactly right.
Right? You just wave at people, like when you see them, and when you're in line in the grocery store, and you can't treat people so horribly because you got to live together. And I think there's been a detachment from that humanity. In social media today, you have all people who think like you, who have opinions like you, and if dare someone expresses an opinion different from yours, the first thing you do is unfriend them. And so we live in these very self-isolating worlds where we don't really encounter our neighbors. How many people, I'd be curious here in San Diego, how many people actually know each of their neighbors on each side of them? And when you grow up in a small town, you know them because if they're sick, you take their trash out for them. or you mow their yard, or you help them out, and that sense of community, I think is really vital, and I think small town America can really teach everyone else a lot about that.
I was having this conversation a few months ago with one of the field reps from Marty Block's office, and she was telling me about a book called I and Thou, and this is a book that's almost 100 years old. It was published in 1923. It's been translated from German to English and a bunch of other languages. And it's that idea that you interact as an individual with another person. And the way you treat people is an important component of your faith in this sense of connection.
Right.
And in larger areas, maybe you feel, or more urban areas or more disconnected cultures, it's transactional. It's me and whoever it is behind the counter at Starbucks, or me and the person that's supposed to give me the food. Me and the person that floats up to my table and I give them an order and they come back, as opposed to a human who's in a job and an opportunity for an interaction. And I have thought about that so much since, because if you're not armed with that perspective you're talking about,
you don't know.
You don't know, and you almost have to work for it or earn it, or it's a novel concept.
Well, and this belief, in a small town, in that world you just described, we look at it like this, and we said, if my neighbor is sick and struggling, that impacts me, because that's my neighbor and that's my community. And if my community is not whole, then I am not whole. And so that's where people reach out and they help each other, and you see a death and you see everyone bringing meals, and we do that. And then when you come to a different type environment, it's kind of this notion that you've got to feel that if some kid is not getting a good education in schools, well, that impacts your kids, even if your kids are in good schools, because of the same principle, right? I mean, we're not strong as a people if any one segment of us are not strong, and that's that sense that you actually care about folks, and you care about folks that you may not know, and I think you're right. I think in a lot of ways we've lost a sense of that, where we've become very fixated on what is good for me and mine. And not this other concept. And you really see that across the board in so many areas. It's not small towns. I mean, as Marines, we know, how do you get in line when you're out in the field and chow shows up? Officers eat last.
Yeah, the youngest and
lowest ranking eats first.
Absolutely.
And why do we do that? Well, we do that because you take care of the folks. You take care of folks before you take care of yourself. And I remember listening to this fascinating TED Talk, Simon Sinek, who's done a number of really good ones. But he said something that really jumped out at me that I think goes to this point of community, of small town, of Marine Corps, of military. And he said, in the military, they give medals to people who sacrifice themselves for others. And on Wall Street, they give bonuses to people who sacrifice others for themselves. And I think if you think about it as a statement of values, as who we are as a society, there really are these two competing interests, which is this notion of I am my brother's keeper. We take care of one another. A sense of community, a sense of purpose, a sense of team, a sense of honor, and making sure that the people underneath you are better cared for than yourself. Juxtapose the world that we seem to live in, where it's just a relentless desire of I will step on anyone's throat if it helps advance me. And I think how we reconcile those moving forward will really say a lot about what the long-term character of America is.
And no one faith or no one background or no urban or rural has, or no military or civilian has the corner on community or taking care of each other. But I think when we don't have it, we pine for it, and we look for it, or we balkanize, we self-segregate. We start thinking about the other instead of the interconnection in the community.
Right.
So you mentioned with nostalgia this sort of lessons are taught and lessons are caught, and it sounds like both of those happen in a small town in Arkansas. But you flee from it.
I did.
How do you get out to California?
Graduated high school I had a lot of family out there. My mom was originally from Riverside. And I had a lot of family in Southern California. And so as a kid, we did a few trips out here, and I was like, hey, that's me. I'm the West, little cowboy, love the ocean, love the weather. Like, I'm coming out here and really wanted to be a Marine. So I graduated high school on a Sunday. We had Sunday graduation on Monday morning. My car was packed at graduation. Graduated, and had a good experience. Played football, Friday Night Lights, did all of that. I mean, had a really great kind of high school experience. Monday morning was in my Ford car, drove all the way to California, straight through, didn't stop, didn't sleep, all the way through, and was here. When
you're that age, as long as the radio's loud, you can drive.
You can drive forever. It doesn't matter. You don't need to sleep. You don't need to eat. You just do it. And you're racing yourself to figure out. And I'll never forget. I drove all the way out here. It's 20-something hours of driving, and I get within a mile of my grandmother's place, and I can't find it. I'm lost. and she's not answering the phone. And so now I've been driving all the way across the country, and I'm within a mile of where I'm supposed to be, and she's giving me the wrong street. So this would have been 95.
Okay.
Summer of 95. And so stayed out here and started school and then joined the Marines and went to boot camp right here in San Diego. And thousands of others stood on the yellow footprints and got screamed at by my drill instructor. Interesting story that I think everyone who served can appreciate. You never forget your drill instructors, and you literally you will forever be able to say their names. And so in 90, so I guess I was here for a year or so, and then I went to boot camp. So we're still talking mid-90s.
So did you do a year at university and then join the Marines?
And I joined the Marines, yep.
Did you join the reserve? Or
I joined the reserves.
Okay.
And so I went to the full boot camp, but I did it in the summer, in between classes.
Is it a 99-day reservist, or what they used to call it?
Yeah, that's what they called it. Yep. Where you'd go in the summer and you would do, and then you go in the next summer and you would do your time. So fast forward now 20 years later, and I'm at an event. And it's for the USC School of Social Work, and it was a little fundraiser for our foundation, this little treadmill run. And I'm talking to this guy, and he's in the master's program there, and Filipino gentleman, and little stocky, little chunky, but there's something about this guy that strikes me as really familiar. And we're talking, and he was a Marine, and he had been a warrant officer, and I was a Marine, and he said, "When'd you go to boot camp?" And I told him, and he said, "Where?" And I said, "San Diego." And he said, "What company?" And I said, "Bravo Company." And he said, "Who are your drill instructors?" And I said, "Senior drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Casau." And he got this twinkle in his eye, and it was him. It was him, and it just took us both a minute, and he's like, "Fletcher," and I'm like, "Senior drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Casau." And then there was this crazy hug and embrace.
So you revert back from a grown man.
To a child. We're hugging each other. We're like, laugh. We're like, tears are flowing, and we're joking about, drill instructor Sergeant Olds and drill instructor Sergeant Johnson and drill instructor Sergeant Vasquez and funny things that happened in my platoon and where those kids went.
So there's a 20-year gap between
20. I had seen him, and I had not seen him one time. Wow. And it was just, and then I teased him. I said, "You've gotten fat." And he goes, "And you need to get a haircut." And it was just such a great and joyous kind of reunion. Now we stay in touch, we email, but yes, I went to boot camp and really I really enjoyed. I actually, I showed up in pretty good shape and kind of felt like I had the routine down and enjoyed it.
So you went through in the summer of '96.
Yes. Yep. And was in a summer class and had I was a year older than most of my class. It was pretty much a high school class and had a different life experience. I grew up in a kind of hard scrapping working class blue collar town. Dad was a factory worker and I just had, I think, more life experience maybe than someone who grows up in suburban San Diego. And a lot of these kids join the military and come to boot camp. They've never been punched in the mouth. I mean, they've never tasted their own blood. They've never endured hardship, and so, in a lot of ways, I think coming out of my background, boot camp was quite a bit easier. It's just some of the things I've been through in life.
So, did you end up getting an occupation that you got to do in alternate summers? You go back to California Baptist as a sophomore with a set of dress blues in your closet.
Yep.
And a fresh haircut.
And a fresh haircut. Yeah, I went back and I had gone there. It was interesting. I wasn't Baptist, but they had a great baseball program. And at the age of 17, I was convinced I was going to be a big leaguer. And not nearly as good as I thought I was when I was 17, it turns out. But I didn't get drafted out of high school, kind of blew off the Naval Academy in top 10 schools because I was going to be a baseball player. And Cal Baptist had this great baseball program. And I got a academic scholarship and I got an athletic scholarship and had some family ties in the area and went there. And good school, great baseball. And I did that and then after the first year went and did boot camp and then went back and finished up my school and had every intention of when I finished doing, they called it the PLC program.
Sure.
Platoon leaders course and going active duty. And then when I finished college, the world was at peace. Marines weren't really calling for folks. And ended up going off and doing some other political stuff.
Did you end up getting to play ball your last 3 years, or you just played?
I played on and off. I played my first year, and then I played part of my second year, and then had a series of injuries. And as a catcher, I mean, I've now had 15 arthroscopic surgeries, and I still play. I still get out on Sundays and play. But I never made it to the big leagues, and probably looking back wasn't as good, like I said.
Well, Nathan, I can talk to you forever about baseball, but we got to take a break.
Yep.
We're going to pick this up in the second segment.
Perfect.
AM 1170, The Answer.
Welcome back to Military Mondays. And with all apologies to Jim Rome, we're going to steal this song for my good friend Nathan Fletcher, who's in the studio with us.
That's my ringtone. When I wake up in the morning, that's what plays on my alarm clock.
I love that.
Yeah, every morning, man, I come out of bed. Someone said, "Hey, you seem like the type of guy who comes out of bed hearing Welcome to the Jungle playing in your head." And I'm like, no, I actually hear it on my phone. Like I come out of bed hearing it on my phone.
That's fantastic. I love that album. 87?
Oh, it's the best. I mean, you can't beat. Every song on that album is great. And I actually think that if you want to take a rock band for a period of time, say 3 to 4 years, I don't know that you can tell me there's not a greater rock band in history than Guns N' Roses during that period. From Appetite to Use Your Illusion, 1 and 2 when they came out. I mean, just remember that just energy and the vibe, and it felt like Axl had saved rock and roll, and it was crazy and raw, and it was just you never knew what was going to happen. I mean, you can argue that other groups have had a greater contribution to music over the totality of their career, because after Use Your Illusion, then they sucked. It was just a train wreck. But I really think for that period of time, it was great.
That's the Sandy Koufax of music. It's this 5-year period of brilliance that's so dominant.
Yeah, Bo Jackson.
Maybe, yeah.
Bo Jackson doesn't hold a single record in football or baseball because he didn't have the longevity of time that it takes. But for that 5-year period, you would argue there was nobody better.
And captivating, too. Even if he wasn't dominant, he was such a presence.
That's exactly right.
It forced people to change.
That's exactly. How many, you remember as a kid, I'll never forget the Monday night game, Bo versus the Boss.
Right.
And then Bo Jackson takes him out at the goal line. And, in fairness to the Boss, who had a broken shoulder, and Jackson had a running head start, but, it's just such a dominant. And then he leaves and he goes and blows out his hip. And then, remember the Dennis Leary commercial. He comes back to play pro baseball, and Dennis Leary does a commercial and goes, "And what are you and your good hip doing watching commercials?" And
so the Boz and Bo are in a commercial together right now.
Yeah, so there's a great if you ever see those ESPN shows, if you can't sleep at night, they're like the 60 for 60, or I forget what it's called, but they have an entire one on the Boz. And I didn't like the guy, and then I watched that, and he actually becomes quite an endearing feature.
Going back to what you just said about small towns in the first segment, really. If you can't get out of it, get into it. If there's only 40 people in your graduating class, you've got to at least find a way to listen to somebody, find a way to honor their opinion, their background, maybe understand them a little bit better. I think the other thing about growing up in a small town, and you talked a lot about this in the first segment, is there's accountability. There's no anonymity, and because you know everybody's business and because you kind of know what's going on, it also you get to watch people change. From 10 to 17, from 5 to 15.
It's very personal.
You don't excuse behavior, but you can explain behavior because you know the things that have happened. And I think when you sit down and watch I think it's 30 for 30. So yeah, you're like, I don't like that guy.
But then you realize you get that. Yeah, you understand their story.
There's a humanity there.
Yeah, because it's easy in today's world to that lack of connection or realism or humanity and the beliefs that we put on somebody because of one action in their life or one statement in their life, and then we make these whole series of beliefs and assumptions about them. And I think you're right. When you grow up in a small town, you grow up together, you see folks, you see families, you see the impact, you understand it better. And when you actually take time to listen to someone to understand their story, what they've been through, how it's impacted them, I think it makes a real difference.
And we create small tribes and community, even when we are in large areas. We create those tribes. I'm not trying to glorify, rural versus urban or anything like that, but you were talking a little bit in the break about being a ball player.
Yeah.
And I think baseball, maybe more than any other sport, I'm biased because I'm a complete nerd about baseball. There's so much failure. You have to be a great teammate.
Yep.
Like there's a different kind of reassurance.
Yep.
And even when you have success in baseball, everyone kind of takes their turn bringing you down a notch.
Oh, yeah.
As if to say, don't
Well, I mean, I love the game of baseball. I think everything that is right in the world happens between the chalk lines, and I love going to a baseball game. It's a social endeavor, and that you talk to someone, you watch the game. There's a rhythm, there's a flow. I love singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" in the seventh inning stretch. You know, my boys and I will be watching a game on TV, and come seventh inning stretch, we stand up on the couch and we sway back and forth and we sing the song.
It's the national anthem of baseball.
Yeah, it's wonderful, but. As a player, and I still play. I go out on Sundays in those hardball leagues, not softball, hardball. I put my eye black on, I pull my stirrups up high, I dive head first, and I go out and I'm a catcher. And what I love about catching is just that. I mean, it's a team sport, but you're kind of the captain of the team. You know, you can say maybe the pitcher is, but I always tease them. But you never play the whole game. Right, catcher, we play the whole game,
and a catcher throws the ball back for
every time.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
and you're still gunning down people at second.
And now in the league I'm in, I think sometimes we throw it back harder than they throw it to us. But I can remember, I used to go up to the third baseman, and I'd be like, "Where's your ticket stub?" He'd be like, "What?" I'm like, "You don't even play, man. You're a third baseman. Like I know they didn't let you in this game for free. Like you just stand there." But baseball is. I mean, you have that sense of team. You can individually shine. You know, through your at-bats. But even your at-bats become a testament to your commitment to the team, because will you move the runner over? Will you hit the fly ball?
Yep.
Will you bunt the person over? Will you do the things that you need to do? You know, when you're running from first to second, will you break up a double play, which there's no statistic that goes with that. But are you going to hustle down there and throw yourself, hurl yourself at someone to help the team? And you get that sense. And I'll tell you, on those Sundays when I go out and play, for that 3-hour window, it's just great. Because you're back in that team and camaraderie and competition, and you can curse a little bit, you can high five, you can chest bump, you do all the things. And Monday morning you may be a little more sore than you were when you did it when you were 19. But I think there's a lot about sports that is useful and helpful. And I encourage my boys. They're great athletes and they do great, but I encourage them to learn the intangibles of that. And we talk a lot about that. How you pass the ball, how you treat your opponent, how hard you play to win, and then how respectful you are when the game's over. And I think there's a lot of life lessons that a lot of us, I certainly learned playing football in the South. Baseball, but baseball everything was second tier to football. Music
gets so much credit for the arts and music in general, for making social change happen. But I'd argue that from a book called The Turning of the Tide, the racial integration of sports teams that entire communities, watched and lionized, leads to little boys and little girls' bedroom walls being integrated by having athletes on their walls that may not look like the people that they grew up with. It may not be at their church.
That's right.
I had a good friend that said Michael Jordan did more to integrate the Deep South by being a Carolina athlete on the Chicago Bulls and having his image, his name, his face become a hero and be allowed on the walls of bedrooms everywhere, when maybe that wasn't normal.
Well, and I think that's true. I mean, you just look at the story of a Jackie Robinson or a Jesse Owens or any of those stories where we lift up as heroic figures, and it's hard. If you're cheering for your team and you've been a Dodger fan your whole life, and you're a racist, and Jackie Robinson comes on your team and he helps them win. Right, you have this massive internal conflict, and you really see the value and you see the merit, and I think that's certainly been true in terms of racial integration. I think it's true as attitudes and opinions evolve on the treatment of the LGBT community.
I've read a lot of Jackie Robinson's writing, and there were players that he thought were awful because of the things they said to him coming up, and then when they came over to the Dodgers, he said they said that to everybody. It was really, it's a more complicated story, but it's a compelling story that whoever's on my team is my teammate.
Right.
Like Jackie it was never personal. It wasn't like they had this illuminating moment. It was that the guy would come after Italians or whatever he thought would get under your skin. Things we just don't do anymore that we don't think is acceptable. Sure. But Jackie said there was this moment where he didn't hate me because I wasn't black. He hated me because I wasn't on his team.
Sure. And
I think that the way we accept difference and celebrate cohesion on sports teams, there's still a lot to be learned from that.
Well, and it's hard. I always had this saying, it's hard to hate someone to their face. You know, and
I were talking about it in the hall on the way.
Yeah, it's not impossible. I mean, we see instances. I would say it's not impossible, but it's hard. And one of the greatest things that change people's attitudes is when they meet someone who maybe they haven't met. They just don't have a different perspective. That's true when it comes to race. It's true when it comes to immigration. Folks who know someone who immigrated here. It's true. I mentioned the LGBT community. As more folks come out of the closet, more folks realize, oh, it's my son, my uncle, my cousin, my brother, guy at work. It starts changing people's attitudes, and that I think is a positive. So we go from the era of Jackie Robinson, where everything he went through, to I take my boy to Jackie Robinson Day, and I try to explain to him what it means, and he literally can't understand it. He can't process through, like, well, Daddy, why didn't they let him play? And I said, well, they didn't let him play because he was black. And my boy's like, there's no connection of thought process for how that could happen. And that's progress.
It's incredible progress.
That's progress. And and we still have a lot of work to do. I mean, clearly, not all of our country has come down that same road and same path and arrived at the same destination. We see, in so many ways, a lot of the racial tensions are maybe worse than they were even when we were growing up. It's not that they're worse. I think that the people are more vocal.
Sure.
And I think we all have to strive for that day where no one's kids understand why Jackie Robinson's day is significant.
We're not there yet.
No, we have a long way to go.
But we should allow ourselves some credit for the progress and the hard work that was done.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned baseball. I go off the rails. I apologize. So we were talking about your time as a Marine reservist, and then you almost went into PLC. You finished your degree. I guess you're a corporal or sergeant in the reserve.
Right in there. Yep.
And then what happens?
So then I get selected over. So I was doing some international work, political work. I'd been in Cambodia, Serbia, East Timor, doing election violence monitoring, human rights work. And I'm at my reserve unit one day, and a guy walks up and he says, "Hey," he said, "Are you the Marine that goes to all those countries and wanders around the villages and talks to people?" And I kind of laughed, and I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You need to come to our unit." And I said, "What's your unit?" And he said, "Well, we're human intelligence, counterintelligence." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, we get intelligence from people, and then we go out and gather information. We do these things." And he said, "We think you'd be a good fit. We want you to come screen for it." And I said, "I didn't know the Marine Corps did that." And he said, "Most people don't." And so that day I went over and I screened, and it changed my life.
What was your occupational specialty?
And I was an armorer.
Okay.
Armor. And so to get out of the armory and to get out and do that. So I went over, LAP moved over, and that was all right around September 11th happening, kind of world falling apart. So then I went to school for that, which is in Virginia Beach, in Virginia, Dam Neck. Did a couple follow-on schools, and then more or less for 3 out of the next 4 years was on a series of active duty orders. So I went to school for 5-6 months, had probably a year total kind of active duty time training, deployed to Iraq in 2004. Spent the entirety of the year there. Started in Iskandariyah, which was south of Baghdad, was the dividing line between Shia and Sunni. And we were right outside this power plant. It was on the banks of the Euphrates, and the smokestacks were their mortar aiming points. And we would get just rocked there. And I developed a line there that I apply throughout life that says you can't dodge a mortar.
You're right.
And the lesson that I took away from that is, that mortar gets dropped in the tube and you hear this thunk. And then you have, 20 to 40 seconds before it hits, and you can't see it, you can't hear it, you don't know where it's going to hit. And there was this great consternation and stress. Oh, do I run over here? Do I run over there? And I'd say, well, it doesn't matter. You can't dodge a mortar. You don't know. So don't worry about it. Just get in the bunker and relax. Because if it's going to hit you, it's going to hit you. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so I really channeled a lot of that into, but what I do control is my weapons clean. I have extra ammunition. I have my night vision goggles. I got extra batteries. I'm not lost. I'm not asleep. And so I really, in that first combat deployment, adopted the mindset that said, if I'm not coming home, you're either getting lucky, which means the mortar hits me, and if so, then hey, you got lucky. Good on you. Or you're going to out-soldier me. You're going to be a badder dude than I am. And I said, that's not going to happen. Right? I want to meet that man. And so I really think in the repeated 3 a.m. bombings in Iskandariyah, I said, hey, you know what? That doesn't bother me. Here's what I'm going to focus on. And so then we moved up to Habbaniyah, right across from TQ, right between Fallujah and Ramadi. and spent all of 2004 there doing our deal, and then came home, took my mountain bike off a cliff, shattered my left foot, had a series of foot surgeries, got better, and then deployed and went to Africa. Did a year in Africa, in the Horn of Africa, out kind of living with locals. And then along the way did some time in Yemen, South America, a few other places, and then got out 2007-ish. Called it a career and hung it up.
So that's a 10-year period of time, right, being both a reservist and an active duty reservist or an AR reservist, or reservist on AR orders. Obviously, going from being an armorer to a human guy is a big shift.
Oh, it was great. It was wonderful.
What happens in 2007?
So I come back, and I wanted to stay in because we all do, and you have that, that survivor's guilt, which is very real. And I struggled a lot with that. Your friends who died, you just feel horrible, and you just think, God, I didn't do enough. I didn't serve enough. I wasn't in enough difficult environments, and you have these illogical things like, how if I'd lost a leg or something, I might feel better. But it was transition time, and it was time to move on in life. And so I thought, how do I continue to serve and make a difference and lead a team? And so I decided to run for the state legislature, and I said I will lead a team and we'll fight the good fight in a different way. And I ran and got elected in 2008 to the California Assembly.
Wow! As far as figuring out what the next chapter is going to be, that's a big move. We're gonna take a quick break here, Nathan. We could talk all day, but we're gonna take a quick break, and we're gonna pick that story up in the third segment.
Perfect.
Thanks again for being on the show.
AM 1170, The Answer.
Sorry you didn't see him, but I'm glad to talk. Oh, I'm still alive.
Welcome back to the third segment. You're here on Military Mondays with our guest Nathan Fletcher, a proud dad, former Marine, a professor of political science, and our guest on the show today. Some of the best conversation on Military Mondays happens during the break, and it doesn't all make it on the air. But going back to the first segment, we talked about your background in a small town, and then in the second segment, we talked about your Marine Corps career, right, and some of the volunteer work you did as a reservist for NGOs for democracy abroad,
right,
and how that led to maybe a career shift. And then after your time in the Marine Corps was done, your transition plan of seeking elected office for yourself.
Right.
So someone who made democracy happen to maybe more of a participant. You want to bring us in, Nathan, and tell us about that?
Yeah, I had always had an interest in the political process, and I had done the work in all these countries helping, and I'd done some domestic campaign work and some stuff with political parties and different stuff, but I hadn't run, and so I came back and I ran, and it was an interesting experience. I didn't have any name idea. I knew some folks from some of my prior work, and I had some help from some folks who were great. But really going out and being a candidate for the first time is an entirely different endeavor. And so started campaigning and put together a team and raised some money and went out and did it. And you appreciate a lot the real grind that folks who run for office go through, in the sense of, you're out there and you're asking folks, hey, would you give me your money? You're walking door to door to total strangers. Nobody knows who you are. It's just, and no one knows what the job is. I remember one day, even after I'd won the race, I was knocking on the door and I told the guy, hey, I'm Assemblyman Nathan Fletcher. And he said, well, that's great, son. He said, what is it you assemble? and he literally had no clue. But, I got elected, and we immediately went into a crisis situation. We had a $42 billion deficit on a $100 billion total. So we were 42% in deficit. We had the Great Recession of 2008. We had jobs being lost. Everything was in free fall. It was a really, really difficult time. And I'll never forget this, because there's a lot of stuff, when you run for office, everyone loves to hate people that run for office. And yeah, that's part of the process. That's fine. I get it. But the stuff that happens matters. It really matters. And shortly after I got elected, we had a problem where people were losing their job and they were losing their health care. Because for almost all Americans, your health care is tied to your job. And so we would tell folks, if they lose their job, they say, well, why don't you just do COBRA insurance? Well, you can't afford COBRA insurance if you have a job. Now, how are you supposed to afford COBRA insurance if you lost your job?
It's incredibly expensive.
It's incredibly expensive. And if you just lost your job, how do you, you can't do that. So the federal government had done legislation where folks who lost their job for big businesses, they would subsidize it for a period of 9 months. But it wasn't small business. Well, most folks work for small businesses. So Dave Jones, who's now the insurance commissioner, and I came together, and we put together a plan where this is somewhat complicated. We feed the insurance companies. We use that to draw down some federal money. We cobbled it together, but basically you could do the same. You could keep it for 9 months. We didn't fight about it. We didn't argue about it. We worked out a complex thing. We got it through. It got signed. And I was doing a town hall. I did town halls every weekend in a different community, the library, park center, wherever folks would come up. And I didn't care if you came or not, as long as you knew I'd be there and I'd answer your questions. And afterwards,
So access to your representative.
yeah, just say, hey, look, I'm your state assemblyman. You probably don't know what that is, but I'm going to be at the library from 9 to 11 and come out and I'll answer your questions. And and even if you don't come, at least you know I was there. But a guy comes up to me afterwards. It's him and his wife, and he said he was very serious and kind of dark. And I said, oh, what can I do for you? And he starts crying. And he said, I have a son who has a developmental disability. I have a special needs son. And he said, I lost my job. And he said, I was going to lose my health care. And he said, you can't imagine what it feels like to think you can't take care of your kid. And now his wife's crying and I'm crying. And he said, and then I heard about this bill that you did. And he said, I signed up and I was able to keep my health care for 3-4 months, and then I got another job and I got off and I went back to working. And he said, but I can't tell you how much that meant. And so I always tell people all of the nonsense and garbage you go through when you run for office, and this group hates you and that group hates you, and people say this about you on Facebook or whatever. And then a lot of stuff you just got to do that maybe you don't want to do. You're out at night, you're away from your family, and you're walking in parades and a lot of these silly things. You have one instance like that. And I said, you can live on that for a long time. Because that's where you know that the job you were sent to do, you actually got done. And when you actually got it done, it actually made a difference for somebody. And so I think those were the moments that really drove me through what was a very difficult period, is knowing that, hey, this stuff matters.
I think there's a Mark Twain quote that I can live without food and water and survive for 2 good months on one real compliment.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm paraphrasing it poorly, but this idea that someone who recognizes and appreciates not just who you are, but what you do, and offers it up to you.
There'll be no commercials made about that.
That's a real service moment, yeah.
And there's no awards made on that, but, I remember we would have regular staff meetings. I spent a lot of time with my team, because you're only as good as your team. And I would share with them that story, and I would say, listen, this is why we do it. So when I'm driving you at 9 o'clock at night, that no, that's not good enough. We need to do it better. And when we're pushing to get one more vote for a bill or one more group to support it, I said, that's why you do it. It's that guy and his wife and their kid. Because at the end of the day, public office is public service, and you have the opportunity to improve the lives of the people you represent. And if you view it that way, then it makes it a lot easier to endure, the noise and the chatter and a lot of the nonsense you get that is just the price of admission. If you put your name on the ballot, people are not going to like you. Accept it. And don't let it deter you from doing what you think makes a real difference.
So your public service after being an assemblyman, as I understand it, you start sort of teaching from that experience as an adjunct, and you also start a nonprofit called 3 Wise Men.
Right.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
So my exit from politics, I had someone the other day, I was speaking to a Kiwanis club, and the lady came up and she said, hey, I'm sorry you chose to leave public office. And I said, well, I didn't choose to leave. I said, the voters chose for me to leave.
They're the ones that...
Yeah, they made that decision. I had a run for mayor and didn't make it. And so then it's kind of like, well, what do you do next? And I remember a friend of mine, he after the race, he said, so what are you going to do next? And I was like, I don't know. And he said, well, what did you think you would do if you lost? And I'm like, I didn't think I'd lose. Right. And I realized, there's probably, a little too much maybe arrogance or cockiness, but I really had never thought about it. Well, what else would I do? Because I'd served as a Marine and I'd served in the legislature, and I just didn't know what else to do. And so I had this wonderful opportunity at UCSD as a professor of practice in political science to teach, and I feel like that's service and inspiring, and did some work with kind of tech company, kind of helping out, doing their stuff. But really found my purpose in my volunteer work. not in my paid work. And so that was in starting, we call it the Three Wise Men Veterans Foundation. It's named in honor of my cousins from Arkansas, Jeremy Wise, Ben Wise, and Bo Wise. So they were the Wise family, the three boys. So we always called them the Three Wise Men. And we all grew up together, my little brother and them. And I joined the Marines first. Jeremy joined the Navy, became a team guy. Ben Wise, second Wise brother, joined the Army, was a Green Beret. Baby Bo Wise, the third Wise man, he brought it home strong in the Marines. So we bookended the Marines. And then my little brother's a pilot in the Navy. So I tell him he almost counts as a veteran. I'm kidding.
You should tell him that every holiday.
Yeah, I'm like, whatever, flyboy. Like, you haven't sweated in 10 years. No, I'm incredibly proud of my brother. He works very hard, and that's a you want to talk about a job that takes some cojones. You know, you put that F-18 on the deck of a carrier in a choppy sea at night, and you have my utmost respect. But so we all joined. We estimate we did 3,000 days deployed at war. And then if you've got a Marine, a Navy SEAL, a Green Beret, the odds are just not in your favor. You know that you're all going to come back. And tragically, December 30th, 2009, we lost Jeremy. He was running towards the sound of danger. Saw a suicide bomber, charged right at him, got right up on him, and the guy detonated himself. We lost Jeremy and 6 others in Coast Afghanistan. And you know, it sucks. It's when you lose your best friend, it's just awful, and there's really no way to describe it other than it just sucks. So I spent a lot of time with Ben, and really tried to mentor and help him and guide him. And you know, you got to be the one for your family. You got to help out, and he did great for 2 years and about 2 weeks, and then he ran towards the sound of danger into a cave in Afghanistan. And didn't come out. And so we lost Ben, the second one. And when we brought him back, you know, you open up your forms you fill out before you leave, and his only request was to be buried in his service uniform next to his brother. And so then you come to Bo, who's the sole surviving son. He's kind of saving Private Ryan. And you realize that Jeremy and Ben died, and they died for something. And we can debate whether we should have been there or not been there. But at the end of the day, they died for each other. It's that bond. It's that oath. It's that belief that we were running towards the sound of those in need and oppression and tyranny. And I can understand it. But what I can't understand, AJ, is I can't understand the veteran who survives that combat, and then they come home and they take their own life because they can't survive the peace that follows. And you think about how lost they must feel and how isolated they must feel. And the fact that we haven't done our job because we haven't taken care of the team. Officers eat last, but that means you take care of folks. And we haven't reached out and found them and say, no, brother, you fought for your country, and now you got to fight for your future, and you got to fight for your family. You got to have the courage to ask for help. So I started the Three Wise Men Veterans Foundation, and that's what we do. We try and tackle the stigma of the unseen wounds of war, of post-traumatic stress. We try and drive a message of post-traumatic growth, and we try and reach those veterans with a message that says, hey, it gets better. You have the courage to call and ask for help. You have the courage to do that. And so I found a tremendous sense of purpose in our work at the Three Wise Men Veterans Foundation.
Nathan, please tell listeners how they can find
Yeah, so it's super easy. Find us online. You go to the number 3wm.org, the number 3wm.org. We've got an overview video. We describe our programs, what we do. And then, of course, as any nonprofit, we will gladly take your tax-deductible contributions off your hand for you and put it to good work and good use as we try and help those veterans.
You know, I love your music selection for this third segment. I don't think I got it until you started to wrap it up, but that's a beautiful and powerful song.
Yeah.
I had probably stopped listening to Pearl Jam for 10 years.
Yeah.
You and I are the same age and graduated high school the same year, so that Pearl Jam album 10, loomed large through my high school experience like it did yours. But
yeah. The greatest one, I still think one of the greatest guitar solos of all time.
Top 5.
Yeah,
strong.
Top 5. Fair enough. Top 5. I give you that.
We could argue about it, and I could probably talk myself in and out of the rankings there, but it's definitely the final 4 in the top 5.
But that is the message, though. I mean, and the message to those veterans says, hey, we taught you to fight. We didn't teach you to quit. And, you know, every day of my life, I think about Jeremy, and I think about Ben, and I think about those we lost. And I think about how do we honor them, AJ? And the way that we honor them is by living our life. You know, those veterans who didn't get a chance to live the rest of their life, they would have loved their kids. They would have been good husbands and good fathers and good friends. They would have helped other people in need. They would have stopped and helped that person who had a flat tire. They would have lived a life of purpose. And so we honor them by living our life.
Earn this.
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day. Every day. And every day you got to get up and you got to say, did I honor my friends by living a life of purpose and progress and making a difference and helping other people? And we make mistakes along the way and we learn our lessons, but every day we try and do that. And so when you encounter that veteran who's contemplating taking their own life, you tell them, man, you can't. You can't. And it's not just that you can't for you. You can't for the legacy of your brothers and sisters. And I think if there's one veteran who hears our message, who we reach and we help, then it's all worth it.
Well, Nathan, it has been fantastic to have you on the show today. I can't believe we're already out of time, but thanks for your music selections.
You got it.
Because after we leave today, I'm putting the live back on yet again on my ride out, and thank you for telling us your story. It's a compelling story, and it's not about you; it's about service and other people.
That's exactly right.
We're always happy to tell that story here on Military Mondays.
Appreciate you having me, brother.
Hey, we
Thank
try
you.
to educate and empower and entertain as well as inform. And I think your message today was also inspiring. Doesn't start with an E, but I'm going to throw it on there.
There you go.
Hey, thanks for being on, brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you.